Guys, welcome back to another episode of the Hawk Zone Rundown with RMAC, with B Rice. We're getting into it today. A lot to talk about. Before we get into it, guys, hit that subscribe button you see right now on the screen. Hit the like button and notification button so you know when future episodes are coming up. Also, we're on anywhere you get your audio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts too. Get in there and like and subscribe that. So B Rice, interesting coming off this championship weekend. What are some of your thoughts about the games, and then also the coaches that are now kind of ready to get some interview time going on here?
Yeah, no, man, for sure. Like if you look at it, like this couldn't have actually worked out any better in Seattle's favor. Like we're going Macdonald's available now, Johnson's available. Like I predict Seattle's got a coach. Like we're dropping this now and it's Monday night. I would say Seattle's head coach is probably announced Wednesday, late Thursday, at the latest Thursday. Like what is it? Johnson's today or is having his like tonight in Detroit. Like John Schneider's flown out there. Then he's meeting with Macdonald tomorrow. And then I think from that point, the reason why he flew out there too is because he's going straight from there to Senior Bowl, which is this weekend. So like that's a pretty big step if you're gonna go and meet these guys in their hometown rather than have them come out and then you take off. Like I feel like this is Seattle's push. Like these are the two guys they've been waiting for. Now that the conference games are over, now they can go and finish off their search and get this taken care of. But speaking of the conference games, like that was very interesting. The first game was extremely boring. Like I'm gonna
Oh my
be
god! Oh
dead.
my
It was
god!
it was painful to watch. Like we can get touch on that a little bit more in a bit here,
Yeah,
but
touch on it.
yeah, like who asks how do you go from being like I look at Baltimore, how do you go from
Yeah,
being the number one rush team in the NFL all year to then asking the Lamar Jackson to throw it 82% of the time in this game? Like, what are you doing? Like, the Chiefs defense is not that vaunted that you can't run the ball still. Like, there were very few plays where I was like, oh, like let Lamar be Lamar. Like, it was almost they tried to make Lamar into Tom Brady. And it's like that's not
right.
gonna happen. Like, I know everyone, talks about Lamar, he's a running back, he's this, he's that. Like they make that mockery of the memes and stuff. Like Lamar's a
Right.
good quarterback,
Yeah.
but watching this, like Lamar is a far superior athlete playing the quarterback position than he is a far superior quarterback and a decent athlete. Like, I don't know, man. I put him in the same category now, and people are probably gonna blow up the comments and say, I'm losing my mind. But would you take right now? So let's play this quick game here, Armac. Would you take Jared Goff or Lamar Jackson?
I mean, like you said, depends how you use them,
But that's
right?
my
I
point
mean,
right there.
yeah. I mean, why go away from your identity? Like I get it. I mean, is it the pressures of this game? And it would, like you said, boring was a good word. And just like, what is going on here? Like all season, we're seeing this team just, hey, this is the number one team in football. Like in football, they routed the Niners. The
Yep.
Niners, if they make the Super Bowl, and people were talking, whoever wins the AFC is going to win the Super Bowl. We'll see. But like the Chiefs, it's just like, we'll touch on the Niners game too. But like both these teams, you're just like, how did they end up in the Super Bowl? You know what I mean? Like I look at how San Francisco got there. Both these games, Green Bay and Detroit, it was like Green Bay is a younger team, so it's like, okay, I'll give a pass to all the mistakes they were making. But and we'll keep touching on the Lamar thing, but just both these teams, how it was just like you almost woke up, you're like, Niners Chiefs, like how did that happen? Because it was like they didn't look like Super Bowl teams. Is this
No.
is this the play of the league now? Like is this the standard? Because it wasn't what I expected. I mean, keeping on the Lamar Jackson and the Ravens game, like I don't know, man. You're waiting for him to take that next step as a team, like him as a leader. Okay, this is the year he gets to the Super Bowl and maybe wins it. And it's just like, here we go again with Lamar and the Ravens.
But how bad does this look now if they've fired Greg Roman because he couldn't do this with Lamar, he couldn't, and
Right.
then the new guy comes in and does the exact same shit with
Yeah.
Lamar. Like
Yeah.
they don't have ridiculous weapons at receiver. Like
No.
yes, Zay Flowers is a decent rookie receiver, but Odell's over the top and over
He's
the
old.
hill.
Yeah.
Bateman's never materialized. Mark Andrews was playing on a bad leg.
Yeah, well, they rushed him back. It just
Yeah, like there was nothing in that game where I went, okay, like if I was playing this game, let's make this muddy. Let's go
hmm
ball and control the clock. And they kept giving the ball back to KC. Now, on the other side of the ball for the Ravens, their defense played phenomenal.
Yeah,
Like their defense is a Super Bowl caliber defense. Like
absolutely.
hands down. You went in and basically the first quarter, you took your blows from the KC offense. And then after that, you shut them down. They didn't do anything the rest of the day. But you couldn't like I just look at so many things in that. Like Zay Flowers catches the deep ball. He takes the dumb taunting penalty.
Ugh.
Zay Flowers gets the ball. He dives to the goal line. He fumbles it. Like,
I gotta
and then,
ask you a question.
yeah,
Like, as a, knowing the game, diving in that situation, like,
made no
just
sense.
run and put your head down.
Yep.
Like, you are so vulnerable in that position. As it just, I just think, like, as a pro, well, I know you're young, but you've been playing this game. Like, what are you doing? I get the moment, but put your head down and hit someone and cross the goal line. I mean, it
100%,
just,
man.
it blows my mind
100%.
when you see it, right? It just does.
Well, it's frustrating because that literally, I was at the bar watching the game with a couple buddies, and we literally sat there and we were like, yeah, that's the game right there. Like they
For
weren't going
sure.
to recover from that. Like you get all the way down there. If they
Yeah,
score there, it's 17-14.
for
This
sure.
is
It's a
like
brand
now
new
you
game.
put pressure back on KC. When you fumbled it there, like KC went, okay, we can just kind of keep doing what we're doing. And they're took them this long to get down here. And then again, they get down in the same spot in the fourth quarter with like 8 minutes left. And what does Lamar do? He throws into triple coverage. If there's three guys covering one dude, there's two other guys open. But it was just like, and that to me just sums up, a lot of the Lamar Jackson conversation. He is a great quarterback. He is not an elite quarterback. He's going to win MVP this year because it was a down year quarterback play across the league.
Yeah, for sure. And that honestly, that's a whole podcast that we can
Oh, it
do
is. We'll get into that.
about quarterback play in general. Like real quick, because I want to touch on the Lions and Niners. I was never a Tom Brady guy. Like but I respect the hell of him. But you almost miss him, and you miss the Mannings, and you miss that era of, like, to me, just overall better quarterbacking. And I'm not talking about the athletes, and that's a whole different debate about athleticism now compared to back then and all this kind of stuff. But I just mean the overall quarterbacking, and I think that would be something we should sit back and talk about down the road, because when you look at the guys that are in the finals, right? And Mahomes is in his own category, but Lamar, and then on the other side Brock, and we'll get into that, and even Jared Goff. Like, these are your final four guys, and they all have a lot of question marks, a lot of question marks. And like you said, Lamar on that side, it looked like he was trending, and then it's like, oh, here's a few decisions that you're just like, what? And then you're just back to questions again with him, right? Can he do it? How are you confident now, say next year, that he's can beat Pat? It, you just you can't, right?
So here's the way I look at it. Like if you look back at the era of football that we really watched, I would call it the golden years of quarterback play, which
Right.
is late 90s, early 2000s to about 2016, twenty
Mm-hmm,
seventeen is
mm-hmm.
what we'll call it. You had like a down year was Joe Flacco winning the Super Bowl. A down year was a rookie Ben Roethlisberger winning the Super
Right,
Bowl. Like
right.
I just look at, you had the Mannings and we were blessed. We had Manning, Brady, but you had Rodgers, you had,
Oh,
even
dude.
Romo. You can throw Romo in. Romo would be an upgrade over some of the quarterback play we have now in the NFL. And
Yeah.
remember, Romo used to get his ass chewed out by every
Yes.
in the day. But you look at that, like you had Romo in that. You had Jay Cutler.
Yeah.
Like you had some exciting, good quality. A lot of those guys that were what we considered at that point, like the average or the median line in the NFL, would be top 10 quarterbacks right now.
Yeah.
Like they were such better passers of the football and stuff. And
Right.
yes, we have some freaks right now that can throw the ball like a Mahomes really well. Mahomes could go back to that age and still be a top five quarterback.
He'd be great in any era. Yeah.
And that's where I look at it and I go, okay, so you take Mahomes out of that. Now what do we got? Like we got Burrow, we got Herbert, and I'm not trying to say Lamar isn't good. So I don't want our
No,
listeners
no,
to
no,
think
no.
that
Of
is
course,
Lamar
of
isn't
course.
good. but I'm taking Lamar and looking at it, what people were trying to project onto Lamar to what Lamar really is.
Yeah.
And unless you are going to cater your entire offense around Lamar and what he does well, and stop trying to change him into something that he's not, you're going to struggle with Lamar. You're going to have your
Yeah.
highs, but then when teams figure out and you play a good seasoned defensive coordinator like a Steve Spagnuolo, he's going to come up with shit that's going to stop Lamar Jackson.
Right.
It's going to happen. So what's your counterpunch? And Baltimore didn't have a counterpunch.
Yeah. No.
That was the reality.
Yeah.
So that's how I look at that game. Speaking of Jared Goff and Brock Purdy, I guess we'll transfer over to
Yeah.
the
Let's get over to the other game.
that
Well, I
hurt to
mean,
watch.
listen, I turned the TV on when it was just 14-0. They just got the second TD, and I was like, okay, here we go. And they were running down their throat. They were playing good football, pressuring Brock, right? And that's what I've always said. Get some pressure on this kid, and he's gonna turn the ball over. He's gonna airmail it, whatever. He's just not gonna, And then we'll get into kind of both sides of it. You come out in the second half, absolute disaster. Dan Campbell, disaster. Execution, disaster. Like, I mean, listen, I know shit happens, but like, big big time players make big plays in big moments, right? And you're a safety. You got to beat on a football for a pick. It can't
Oh
bounce. It
God.
cannot bounce off your face. Like, it just can't.
There's,
And
there's
and
that old
people,
saying though, Armac, if you're a safety and a DB and you can't catch, there's a reason you weren't a receiver.
all right. I mean, knock the ball down. I'm just, it's just, it was, and then, okay, I great focus, but then you go to, you question Dan's 4th and 2 call. And I know the ball was low, but you got to catch that ball, and then across the middle, a first down, automatic drop, punt there, fumble. I mean, everything went wrong. And then on, with Dan Campbell, it's like, dude, you have to take the point. You got to go 3 possessions at that point and really put the pressure on them. And then one of the worst plays, and I'm going to get your thoughts. I know the game was at that point, you still had a chance to tie it. You had 3 timeouts, and that's where it's like, dude, you're the head coach. You got to be thinking a couple of moves ahead here. Like,
Yeah.
you call a timeout, you've essentially ended the game. So this TD doesn't matter. Like, an onside kick nowadays is like, what, 2% conversion rate. They've
Yeah.
made it so hard, it's like impossible. So you can't be like, oh, we might have a shot at an onside kick. No, you've essentially ended the game. Throw the ball 2 times in the end zone. Worst case scenario, you kick a field goal, you're still down a possession, whether you score a touchdown or not. You still got to get an next score, but you got time. You got to go 3-0. You got to play D, but you giving your team a chance. So what's your take overall? And then we'll get into the coaching on both sides of both games there. But obviously head coach. But what was your thoughts? And yeah, man, I feel bad for City of Detroit, dude. I mean,
Oh, I do too. And here's the thing. I think there's a couple things. I think first off, I don't think Detroit expected the first half of that game to go that way,
mm,
where they were blowing the brakes off of San Fran. I think they thought they were going to be in a dogfight. And what it kind of looked like to me a little bit was they got kind of overwhelmed
yeah,
by the fact they were up and started triple thinking shit rather than just
got tight. Yeah,
keep playing the way you've been playing. Don't think, just react, go, 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 which is that's what got them out on front of the Niners is the Niners were choking. They were choking the game the same way they did against Green Bay the week before.
same thing, man.
Um, and the thing was, is you had to know, okay, the Niners are gonna make they have the best offensive play caller
They're
in the
gonna make
NFL
a
who's gonna
push.
figure out his shit. So they're gonna probably start scoring a bit, but we have to continue playing our game. Montgomery and Gibbs were not nearly as effective in the second half because they kept trying to do the same shit. They didn't change anything really to get them, and they kept coming. Like Ben Johnson kept coming with the same stuff. I mean, that's not saying that wasn't the right thing to do, but then as the head coach in Dan Campbell got showed, I think, a little bit of his inexperience
Hmm.
from not being an OC, a DC, being a positional coach to now being a head coach. I think he showed a little bit of an experience in understanding the situations you were in. You kick one of those 2 field goals, you're either tied or winning this game.
Yeah,
Plain and simple. That's what's happening. So going for it, like, we didn't, like he mentioned in his press conference, they were gonna bleed the game away. If you kick the two field goals, they have to be more aggressive. They're gonna be
Yep.
more aggressive, and they're gonna force shit because they're gonna
Brock, you
have
got to force
on it.
Brock to force.
Exactly. And so especially when they got down there at the end and they blew all their timeouts and they didn't have anything and they didn't blow their timeouts.
Well,
They
they
waited.
blew the
It's
one.
like,
They blew the
yeah, they
one,
blew the
but
one.
essentially ended the game.
Yeah. Like you needed to keep all three of those, kick it deep, play defense, hope you get the ball back with like something under a minute left.
Mm-hmm.
At least you can still kind of move the ball and you're only still a field goal down at that point, maybe. Like that's where I just look at it and I went, this is an experience in coaching. This is an experience in understanding the situation. And it makes me wonder who on his staff, you know how like we had Pete Carroll here and he had Tater,
Yes.
that's his guy. Who's Dan Campbell's guy and what's his experience in those situations?
Right.
I the sad thing for me is I kind of believe what he said in his post game, I think, press conference with somebody or interview, where he said, I think this was our shot. I don't believe that,
Right.
but I told that to our guys, this may have been our
Is
shot.
that not something you say pregame? Like,
Yes.
hey guys, we did, like, you got to realize how big this moment is. Even some of you guys that might be year one, year two, this could be your only shot. You could play in this league another 12 years. But essentially, like, some of those players got to be thinking, like, damn, you one of the reasons why we lost this game. And I think it's a combo because I think the execution, like you said, you see those drops, simple drops, that's nerves. But
Okay.
but those Dan Campbell decisions, dude, like you said, I'm the Niners now, and I'm only down 2 possessions. Now, hey, I still got my dog and Christian McCaffrey. We can keep feeding them because guess what? If I come down and get a score, now it's only a 1 possession game, and we're feeling good because we're a confident team, we're an experienced team. You
Well,
know,
and that's the whole thing. Like, I just that when you say that though, especially after you lost, to me, it tells me that there's doubts that you're ever going to be back. And as a franchise as Detroit is, where they're as volatile as they can be, where they can
yeah.
be in the playoff one year and then be 10 years before they're back in it again,
Mm-hmm.
it is concerning to me that that's the choice of words you would use. Like,
Right.
you gotta sell guys on coming back. You gotta,
Mm-hmm.
guys are gonna want to get paid. And like, so yeah, you're right. But that's the thought you keep to yourself. Or maybe you and the GM have that conversation when you get back to Detroit, being like, man, I really think this was our one good shot at it. Like, hopefully we can still rebuild and get back. But to say that publicly to the media, I'm not a fan of it. That's more of an internal statement with maybe say that to the team internally when you're back to Detroit and you're cleaning out your lockers and you have your final like team meeting, whatever it is. But speaking Armac on these two games,
Right.
this kind of helps out our Hawks. So we'll kind of
Right.
pivot into
Pivot
the
in.
Hawks segment of our show. But both of the guys that Seattle's now linked to are both available, which I'm kind of shocked because I expected one of them to be still playing in the Super Bowl and
Yeah.
this search get dragged out. So like, they've got Johnson, who they're currently meeting with today in Detroit, and then they got Macdonald tomorrow. So it's interesting because like watching those two games, it does change my opinion on who I think they should go with, and it doesn't at the same time. So I'll give you my 2 cents. So if we go with McDonald, say we take the Baltimore DC, McDonald's our head coach, I've got reservations on how he builds the staff. And like, kind of what we've had with Rob, where we've talked with Rob Staten about it, and even Jackson Bevins about it too. Um, I want to know how is he gonna be able to take some of the guys we already have on our roster and build a similar Baltimore defense because I just don't see it. I just don't see it on our roster right now. Like I feel like it's going to cause more of a rebuild than we're willing to admit, bringing him in as our head coach. That's not saying I don't want him because he is the one coach that's given McVay and Shanahan problems all year. But then on the flip side, you look at Ben Johnson, and my question is Ben Johnson as innovative as people think he is? Watching that second half of that game, because we are going to be playing against the 49ers, like that is in our division 2 times a year. Like it just there leaves more questions, I think, unanswered than answered after those two conference championship games.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. Like, Ben was on the top of my list. And I'm and we're not sitting here saying, hey guys, like we're judging him off one game. But when it's the San Francisco 49ers and we meet them 2 times a year, and this is the team we're going after, and this is kind of who you might be kind of, your guy, whoever your next head coach is, you're going to have to go take care of the Niners twice a year. And that's a reality. So, yeah, you got to put a little weight into it because I think what you're saying is you look at Ben, you look how the offense sort of rolled in the first half, and they come out in the second half. The Niners obviously coming out of the locker room would say, okay, we got to switch things up. This is how we're going to attack them, whatever. And, we already touched on, a lot of things went wrong for the Lions, but how is Ben adjusting? You know, it, the run call at the end, super questionable. I mean, I don't, why, what are you doing? And that's his call. Again, it's not one call. I still like him. And I think that's why John is casting a wide net, and the process is how the process is. And so I think at the end of the day, to be honest, it's like I think I still would lean towards him over Mike Macdonald. Like I agree with you, just because you look at the players and where Mike comes from, which is great. He's in under that regime of Harbaugh and that Baltimore way of doing things defensively, but you still got to have the dogs. And do we? And like you said, then you got to staff up. Whereas Ben, you're the offensive guru. You're going after your DC, and we don't have to replace. It's an offensive kind of game, right? We touched on that. So, even if he has a great year, you might not replace your DC for a bit. So, but again, who knows? Maybe, and that's what's going on here. Like he's meeting, and then maybe all of a sudden, John's like, I don't have feeling a good feeling with either of these two. And I'm being honest, and Dan Quinn's our guy. Like that to me, he's still there. So what do you think? I mean, if say they come in and they just don't interview, or John has reservations, I mean, what are they John's final two? Like,
Yes, they
okay,
are.
so
So here's my point on it. If it was Dan Quinn wouldn't have left Seattle last week before the conference games because
right,
he was there
right,
Thursday over into Friday. And then Jordan Schultz from Bleacher Report dropped an interesting little tidbit today that I kind of perked up a little bit and was like, oh, that's an interesting like statement about Dan Quinn being like, Dan Quinn's prepared to go back to Seattle if need or to Dallas if need be.
right, yeah,
I was like, that's interesting to put out right now when he's supposed to be interviewing, I think
head coach,
tomorrow for the Washington Commanders job.
yeah,
So I was like, oh, that's a bit interesting. And then even today, he was seen at the Shrine Bowl, which is being hosted in
yep,
Dallas, still repping all his Cowboys gear and talking to Shoddy and some of the other people on the staff. So I think he's the reserve. That's what I would
right.
put.
That's sort of what I was saying.
I
Like not
also think there's another reserve that people aren't talking about, and I think it's Mike Kafka more than
right.
people are willing to admit. Because Schefter said something today on the Pat McAfee show
Mm-hmm.
where he kind of went and said, everyone thought Ben Johnson's a shoo-in for the Commander's job.
Right.
I don't think he necessarily is. Dan Quinn was supposed to be the shoe-in for Seattle. I don't think he is. I think one of those two won't get the job, maybe even both. And then he said Seattle could also kind of surprise everybody and do something unpredictable, which leads me to believe that, okay, does that mean Mike Kafka is still on the board or is Patrick Graham still on the board? Like, for me, if you're going to wait this long and now you're flying to these teams' areas to interview these guys, especially like Mike Macdonald is being interviewed in person. And it's the first interview Seattle is having with him because they didn't get an interview in during the time frame they were supposed to before the playoffs started. I I'm thinking here's my take on it. I've gone back between Macdonald and Ben Johnson. When we talked to Rob, I was much more in the Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson category than the Mike Macdonald. We talked to Jackson. I did some more research. I went, maybe I'm more in the Mike Macdonald category. After watching both conference games and looking at it, I'm more in line for this reason, and it's actually not to do with either one of them. It's due to Kansas City. Okay, and this is why. Look at Steve Spagnuolo, a seasoned defensive coordinator. Is he up for a single job right now? No. So you can keep him around for years, keep producing good defenses. So if I'm John Schneider, I kind of want to take the Kansas City MO, get myself Ben Johnson. Like if he's meeting with Ben Johnson right now, you got to ask Ben Johnson, what do we do to get this done? What money do you need? What do you need? I'm not letting you, kind of what Atlanta did with Raheem Morris and not letting him out of the building. You do not let Ben Johnson out of that hotel room, meeting room, wherever the hell you're having this. You get him to sign on the dotted line, cancel the interview with Mike Macdonald, and it's over. Then go start building your staff. Maybe you get a Patrick Graham from the Raiders as your DC because the likelihood of him going back to Vegas is slim. And you start building this coaching staff. But the reason for that is I can constantly marry my quarterback of the future, whenever it's this year, next year, whatever, to Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson has proven he can work with a veteran. So if that means we go with Geno again this year, he can do that. And you can fortify the interior of that O line through the free agency and the draft this year, which means we don't have to spend a draft pick on a quarterback if we don't like anybody that's there. I feel like if we go with Ben Johnson, it leaves us more open, like of more open opportunities to do things. Where if we go with Macdonald, okay, Kafka is likely going to be the OC then, is what I think will happen. But what happens if Kafka has a stellar year and we lose him next year because he goes off and becomes a head coach somewhere? This is what I mean. Like that's where that kind of comes back to bite you in the ass. Is you have to have way more of a succession plan in place for Macdonald than you do for Johnson.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%, man. Like that's the thing with the NFL right now. Like if you like you said, you mentioned a couple times you're gonna have to get three hires right. Well, that's a hard thing to do, you know. So and like you said, we're sitting here and we're breaking down the games. Yeah, Mike McDonald and Ben Johnson, as far as what they did, and we're kind of under a microscope. But I agree, he's still on the top of my list because of the fact that we love him, like what he's done as an OC, and we think he's that guy to go hand in hand with your next QB. And like you said, a lot of similarities. Jared Goff, a lot of similarities with Geno. So he has a lot of similarities from Detroit to Seattle as far as the personnel, right? The running backs. We have better receivers as a whole, so there's an upgrade for you. And like you said, let's shore up that offensive line in the interior, which could easily happen. And let's hope Abe Lucas is healthy and we don't have to worry about that position. But if we kind of focus on that interior, and like you said, if John wants to go accumulate some picks to, say we just got to pick offensive linemen, and free agency is the way to go too. I mean, let's get a veteran in here, but you know, it's time. It's time to really tighten that thing up and give Gino a little more time and just you got everything else really on that offense. And then if McDonald comes in and it has this innovative approach and knows exactly what he wants to do with these guys, then he goes ahead and gets his DC. And like you said, if Mike McDonald, I mean, really, what are the advantages of going with Mike? You're right. Unless he just blows you out of the water in that interview and you're just like, man, I could totally see this guy. But then also Ben's got to like kind of disappoint you and you know what I mean, in that interview. Because it's just coming down to this. Like if John, probably in my mind, thinking if he interviews and we and it's everything else is good. I mean, like, I want to sign him on that dotted line right now.
Sign him, take him to Mobile with you. Take him to Senior Bowl.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Good.
and I honestly think Dan Quinn's the backup in this, and Kafka's the backup in case both these guys flop and John's not sold. But that's why I said, like, if Ben Johnson knocks it out of the park, I wouldn't be surprised waking up tomorrow morning to find out Adam Schefter's reporting Ben Johnson to the Seattle Seahawks and they're canceling their interview with Mike McDonald. Like, I would not be shocked because there's part of me that thinks, as much as there's been smoke and mirrors by John, he really wants Ben Johnson. And Mike Holmgren alluded to that on KJR, saying, I think he really wants Ben Johnson, which means you look at John's track record. When he generally really wants something, he gets it. So if that means like, hey, Jody, we got to throw an extra 3 million at this guy to get him than what we were anticipating. I don't think Jody Allen and Vulcan's going to really be too concerned that, hey, we're throwing him a little bit extra. Like, There's an interesting article. It was an article actually. I was listening to 710 this morning. They interviewed a Baltimore reporter from ESPN, and they kind of asked him like, "What's Mike Macdonald like? Like, what kind of guy is he? Like, how's he fit if he was to come to Seattle?" And the word that got used was he's an introvert. He's a gamer that just loves to be X's and O's, just designing things, but he doesn't like big rooms of people and having to
Mm,
deal with that. So
interesting.
when I watch Ben Johnson and I watch Mike Macdonald at the podium, you can see it. You can see that McDonald's not forthcoming with a lot of things. Johnson's a little bit more charismatic that way. Not a lot, but at least a little bit more.
Yeah.
And you look at the market you're coming into. Like the guy that you are now taking over was like the icon of charismatic and dealing with, the reporters and stuff. So
And we like that about Pete.
we
Like,
did.
and
And that was a cool thing. You always did the Pete read between the lines. What does Pete
sure.
really trying to say? So no, for me, I look at it, I think Ben Johnson, like if I'm gonna build my staff, so we'll just do this little
Sure.
game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Build your
But
staff right now.
if I'm building my staff, I want Ben Johnson as my head coach.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna bring in an OC under Ben Johnson, because I don't know if you really need one, so a pass game, run game coordinator, whatever you want to do, it'd be whoever he wants from Detroit that he feels comfortable with. Maybe Mike Kafka. Maybe Kafka wants to leave New York because of Dayball and come work for a guy that he can be under and learn and get his own head coaching job out of. Defensively, I'm probably going after the guy from Carolina first. Evero, like he's been in for 2 interviews in Seattle. I know Carolina's got Dave Canales, and I think he's going to build his own staff down there. That's the guy I would call him. What he's done with Denver and Carolina's defenses over the last couple of years has been remarkable. Bring him in and say, cool, you're running the defense. If it's not him, go get Patrick Graham. Like, bring in one of those two to run your defense. Say, hey, cool, you go run this and you do your thing. I'm going to take care of the offense and we're all good. So that's kind of the staff I would build under Ben Johnson. Like, bring in guys that are good at their job. And you don't need them. You don't need to say to the DC, hey, we need you to be top 10. Top 10's your goal. Like,
Right.
okay, it'd be nice, but the reality is be complimentary.
Yes.
Our offense stutters a bit. Don't break. Bend. Don't break.
Yeah.
Be like the mid 2000 Seahawks when we had
Mm-hmm.
Hasselback and D-Jack, Bobby Ingram, Corin Robinson, Hasselback. Like we were throwing the ball over the way, running it with Sean Alexander. But there were times we played in games that were a little bit tighter. But what our defense do? They bent, but they didn't break.
Yeah.
And that was the key. That's what got us to our Super Bowl in 05. Go back to that. That's what the NFL is. Like you look at Kansas City, their defense isn't phenomenal. They're not number one, but they bend, but they don't break.
Yeah. 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 No, that's exactly what I want to see. And we've talked about that. Like we want to just, if you know you got generational talents on the defense side of the ball, like a la Legion of Boom, then sure, focus on that and have a complementary offense, whatever, run the ball, do your thing. And if it works, it works. But we know we don't have that. And we haven't had that for a long time. And we've also talked about how whether you like it or not, you made your bet on the offensive side of the ball with paying DK, with drafting a JSN, using a first round pick on a receiver. Tyler's paid. He's whatever. 2 second round running backs, back to back years. So looks to me like you want to have an explosive offense, a top 5, a top 10. And if you bring in a guy like Ben, who can take this offense all of a sudden over the top, and like you said, you bring in your DC, and you don't care, man. Like I don't care what you do with this defense. It's yours. I'm not
Yep.
saying anything, and that's going to be the refreshing thing, especially if we have a guy like Ben, who's an offensive minded guy, because he doesn't want to have anything to do with the defense. And we love Pete, but there's just too much control of that defense, and just in general, he had too much control. So, but again, I also agree with the point about you need a little charismatic when you go up there, and you being too much an introvert. I don't know if it's going to work, especially with some of the guys in the locker room. They're used to a certain way. Uh, and again, I wasn't loving all the Pete things that were just getting tiring, but just being able to be animated and be, extrovert out there, and just, I think we still earn for that. And it's just, but again, my main thing is offensive coach. And man, like you said, it could be 24 hours or less
Yep.
that we could potentially be on our next pod talking about.
We may have an emergency
We
podcast
could
in
have an
the next
emergency
24
podcast, but
hours.
and then so yeah, and then touching on and then we've talked about a couple of guys on the staff left again today. They've been just kind of exiting that door, and I guess really no surprise, right? Clint Hurt, obviously we knew he was going to be back as DC and he was going to be all but gone. But I mean, when you look at it, it really is everyone on the staff is hunting for a job because they know that no job is
No.
nobody's job is safe, and probably for good reason.
Well, yeah, and so you look at today. So Vic Fangio left Miami, went to Philadelphia to be their new DC when they got rid of Sean Desai and Matt Patricia, and now Clint Hurts reunited with Fangio, who kind of got him going in the NFL. He's his D-line coach there, and Carl Scott. Now Carl Scott's the one I'm a little bit upset that we lost. Carl Scott was really up and coming in the league, like was under Saban at Alabama, came here. Like our DBs were doing really good things. You look at Witherspoon last year, Woolen his rookie year. Carl Scott's been here the last 2 years and he was doing some really nice things. So I was kind of hoping maybe whoever came in, we could retain him. But I guess he's got a pretty good working relationship with Clint Hurt and wanted to go with Clint Hurt wherever they went. And then obviously like Shane Waldron and some of that staff, I believe Kerry Joseph, who was our assistant QB coach, has now left and gone to Chicago to be the QB coach for the Bears. So yeah, and I think Andy Dickerson's still floating around looking for OC jobs. I know he interviewed with the Bengals. But yeah, like you said, our that staff wasn't going to come back. There may be in a few guys here and there, and there may still be a few guys that get, asked to come back. But the majority of that I think was we wanted to really clean house, which is, you know, um, as much as they keep saying they want to keep the culture, you think of some of other coaches that have been fired or let go, and their staffs have stayed before, or some of the guys have stayed before. I look at this situation. To me, it's kind of like a hypocritical statement by the Seahawks organization. Hey, we want to keep that peak culture, but we want none of the guys that were a part of it. So, their personnel staff, like the scouting department, all that was under John is going to stay because I think they've done a phenomenal job the last 2 years. Um, but now it's going to be really interesting once this coach gets hired. What does this staff start to look like? Because other teams have, started hiring guys and getting guys on board. So I think it'll be very, very interesting over the coming days here because I wouldn't be shocked if we don't know the majority of Seattle staff by Sunday night.
Right.
What
Yeah.
they've got, OCDC, like it's gonna, I think
It's gonna
once
happen
we
quick.
nail down who it is, we're running and we're full on sprinting because pro days start soon, free agency starts soon.
Yep.
Like it's going to be a whirlwind, and we all know the teams talk. But this is the one thing I want to say before we move on to a couple of the other topics we have to talk tonight. I want to give John Schneider some credit because that dude has a pulse on this league,
Yeah.
on what's going to occur. And like we kept saying, like, why is Seattle so quiet? Like, oh, they're going to lose out on Johnson. Oh, they're going to lose out on Macdonald. Like 2-3 weeks ago, that's what we were concerned about when they fired Pete. Like, why are we not on this? Like, John again has played the pulse of the league and realized that a lot of these teams were not going to want to wait out for Ben Johnson and Mike
Right.
Macdonald. They wanted guys in place now. And part of that shows you just the level of patience, the level of, understanding of the league that John has compared to a lot of these other organizations that panic hire guys. Like, I'm going to be honest, I think we should circle back next year at this time and see if Raheem Morris or Dave Canales or any of these guys still have jobs, because I think, honestly, in my opinion, I think the worst hire of this coaching cycle is going to be Carolina's. And that's nothing against Dave Canales.
Yeah.
Do not think he was ready to step into those shoes. And this is the thing I keep coming back to with Canales because everyone wanted him here in Seattle. If he was so good, why did Pete not promote him?
Right. And
That's a question you got to ask. Why did
yeah.
Pete not promote him ever once?
And when you look at some of these teams, why do you think, is it a panic play? Like if you still got Ben, I mean, obviously a team like Carolina's probably thinking we're down the list to even, try to get this guy or, even a Mike McDonald or whatever. But why are some of these teams so quick to jump the gun and hire a guy? And you look at You look at a few of the coaches that got hired. Is it just a matter of we think we're so far down the list on some of these other guys that these guys, we're looking at sort of this tier, because we're still waiting, and we're and like I said, I've stated that, hey, I think we're a top destination. You can say the Commanders because of what what the situation is. They got a top two pick, right? So you kind of like, if you look at say a Ben Johnson, you're like, hey, okay, this could work, right? But what about some of those other teams, man?
Oh, man, like it's funny. I would say if I was to look back at this hiring cycle and I was going to list jobs on which one I think, I had like two tiers. I had, well, three, but I had two main tiers. The top jobs that came with good ownership,
Yeah.
good surrounding of an organization, good facilities, and some flexibility to do things within the roster.
Mm-hmm.
Commanders and Chargers were that
Yeah.
because of their talent, because of the Commanders had so much cap room, the number two pick. They've got new ownership that's actually investing in the team. The Chargers, on the other hand, don't have the greatest ownership situation. It's not terrible, but it's not great. They've got unbelievable talent there. You're going in with a top five, top 10 quarterback.
Yeah.
Those are why those two jobs to me were the top two. Then Seattle was in the next tier. And
Mm-hmm.
Seattle dropped down for one reason for me. They don't have a lot of cap room right now, which is one. You don't have a young quarterback or the opportunity to get really a young quarterback. You're stuck with Gino, not a bad thing, but
Right.
again, 34 this year, so you're kind of running out of time. You don't generally pick high.
Yeah.
You're kind of
History.
history of being good, so you don't pick high, and you're following a legend. Like you
Mm.
think of all these other jobs, the only other one in theory is Gerard Mayo in New England, but the Patriots have been bad for the last 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't come off a
Not peak,
playoff
but
year
you're coming off a playoff year.
year before.
You're
Yeah.
still 9-8. We have to be honest here, Seahawk fans. Our expectation for a bad year, what our term of a bad year is this year, is 9-8.
Mm-hmm.
That is a bad year.
Yeah.
Our expectation is 10 plus wins, divisional round.
Yeah.
That's a lot to ask of a new head coach to come in and handle. And so that's why for me, they were in the next tier, is because as a coach, if I'm looking at it going, okay, I can go to Washington. There's not a whole lot of high expectations on us. I can go and get a rookie quarterback. I can go and build this the way I want to. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
pretty enticing offer. Ooh, Chargers, I go and get a young quarterback in Justin Herbert, who I'm going to have for the next 15 years, probably. Brand new facility, gorgeous new stadium.
Yeah.
I get to live in South
Yeah.
California. Like, that's pretty nice. And then, okay, yeah, Seattle's there, but damn, I got to follow Pete. I got to make sure we're not getting below 9-8. I don't have a lot of cap room. Like, this is a lot tougher. Like, if I really want to challenge myself, that's the job I want.
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta, Carolina, Vegas, like New England, they're all in the other tier.
Oh yeah.
You're all down the bottom where it's like, okay, whoever takes it, like you're rebuilding, you're attempting to do something. That's about it.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And I just want to say, like, people, Hawks fans got to realize, man, like whoever comes in, I mean, just don't focus on the wins. Like who knows? I mean, we might be surprised and we shore up the offensive line and we win 11 or 12. We don't know. The talent's there, but again, see what the direction is and what the new kind of flow of the offense is and how things are changing on the defense side of the ball. The wins will take care of themselves. Like you said, 9-8. We could have easily not been 9-8 though either. And I think that the record was a little deceiving this year. And like John used the word stagnant. So it's just like we got to go in next year with a kind of a different vision. Don't get so caught up in wins and losses. Like, yeah, ultimately the goal is to win football games, but how is it changing? Is the direction? I mean, because you can play great football and come up short sometimes. But that doesn't mean you didn't play good football or the direction in the future is super bright here. So I think it's just going to be an exciting, optimistic season. And don't get too caught up in the wins because we could take a step back or we could take a step forward. It's just as far as wins are concerned. But I mean, we could win 7 or 8 And at the end of the year, you could look at it and be like, I really love the direction of this team. Like we are about to take off. And you look at a team like the Detroit Lions. We're talking like, man, did they blew this game? They should be in the Super Bowl. Flashback to a year ago when the Detroit Lions were how did they start that year? 0 and
They were like one
6,
and six or something.
1
Yeah.
and 6, like and then almost making the playoffs, right? It came down to them and what us or Green
Well,
Bay,
it's
us and them.
Green
Like it was
Bay.
right there. And now all of a sudden this team, like, so, but again, you look at that team, how are they feeling? How are those fans feeling with Dan Campbell, with the direction of the team? And you weren't focused on the wins per se. They finished strong. And you're like, we can build up on this, which they did. And, you know, we could have kept things the way they were, Pete and everything. And you're just thinking, man, we just might be another 500 year. Whereas if we have a ban or something like this, and this culture, I don't really like using the word, but just the direction and the way the team sort of plays better and just kind of comes together. And like I said, wins take care of themselves. And I just want to see like where how elevated we can get. So, just keep that in mind, right? Because there could be some ups and downs for sure. Like it's just not gonna be well oiled, right? I mean, but we'll see. We're jumping ahead. But yeah, man. So let's move on. Just real quick, touch on some roster moves here, man. Like what are you thinking? I know we've touched on a lot of stuff. Are you hearing anything as far as like anything new, or what are you thinking as far as how we trim this down a bit and some changes you might see here?
So I think a big question that's probably getting asked in these interviews is what do you want to do with Geno Smith?
Mm-hmm.
Because in 2 weeks after the Super Bowl, he's due a pretty sizable contract. Like part of his contract gets put into full effect for the next league year. So I got to think there's definitely conversations. Hey, do you want Geno here next year? Do you view Geno as your like potential starting quarterback? Like we may not be able to get a quarterback. Like what is the plan here? And so I think that's a huge kind of component to these interviews. But potential cap casualties, like guys that I think I don't see having on the roster. Jamal Adams.
Yeah.
Like I know we talked to Jackson and I made the pitch about moving to linebacker, and that's a perfect world. That's like this is gonna line up perfectly. I think he's done way too much in this short time period. And he actually did something odd today on on his Instagram. He posted a story and it was like a flash through of all of his years in the NFL, Jets to Seahawks and so on. Maybe Jamal Adams retires.
Mm.
Maybe I'm just gonna float that out there into the
Well,
Seahawk
I'll say
universe.
this too, man. He can't stay healthy either.
Nope.
That's the other thing. I mean, if he was healthy, but he was shitty in coverage and even with the tweets and all the other stuff, you could say, listen, this guy is he stays healthy, he's on the field. Let's have a talk. We can put all that other crap aside. We can move to linebacker. But with everything, man, like you can't even count on the guy to even stay
No.
on the field. So it's run its course. I agree.
So just some numbers for everyone. There's 2 years remaining on his deal. He
Right.
goes in it during the 2024 season, he'll be 29. So just shy of 30. His cap hit next year is $26.9 million, which makes up 10%, almost 11% of the projected cap for the team.
Wow.
Savings if you release him pre-June 1st, 6 million. If you do it after, 16.5.
Right.
I don't know how you do not do that if you're going to try and keep Leonard Williams around. That frees up a lot of money for you at a position that is not valued in the NFL. And that is a position I hate to say to everybody that I know there's the Pete Carroll lovers out there. Jamal Adams and the safety group were a prioritized position by Pete.
Mm-hmm.
The NFL does not prioritize that the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Name me, and people in our comments on YouTube, I'd love to, debate this with you. Name the safeties of the two starting teams right now in the Super Bowl.
Right. Yeah,
Name
man.
them.
Yeah,
Are they
exactly.
hallmark names that you think about constantly? Without searching it up, tell me who the Chiefs' two starting safeties are and the
Are they the
numbers.
highest paid safety room in NFL history?
No,
Right. You know what I'm
exactly.
saying? So yeah, like you said, Pete guys, quandary, man. Which like
So here's
people have
Quandre.
gone back and forth. What do you think? Because we've
No,
talked to some people. Some people say, yeah, he might be. What do you think John's going to do, man?
I think John's going to either ask. I think John's going to probably release Quandre.
Right.
He isn't playing the way he used to. He's 31 this year, so he's 2 years over 30 now. He's got 1 year left on his deal. So you might keep him if you cut Jamal for 1 year, but he might not want to play on a 1 year. He might want more security.
Yeah.
His cap hit 21.2. He makes up 8% of the projected cap. So between your two safeties, that's 20% of your cap, roughly.
Crazy. And not getting that production.
No. So if you release him or trade him, it's $11 million you're eating. Doesn't matter if it's post June or pre June 1st, it's the same value. I don't see it. I could see them drafting a safety to replace him. You have Julian still under contract. I think Julian ends up being the safety next year, one of them. Now another guy, Tyler Lockett. And we've had Chris Glough say he thinks Tyler stays. Jackson Bevins seemed kind of on the side that, Tyler might stay, Rob Staten. Like, I don't know, man. I look at it and I go, Tyler's 32 next year. He's got 2 years remaining on his deal. He makes as much as Jamal makes at 26.9.
It's crazy.
So he's another 11% of your cap. So in 3 players, your 30% of your cap's eaten for next year. If you cut him pre-June 1st, it's 7 million. Cut him post at 17.
Right. And the one thing I'll say about Tyler too, and it's tough. Like he apparently, I mean, I just found this out that he didn't have over 100-yard game this year.
Nope.
Right. But and it was that's a little interesting too, because you and me sort of like, hey, JSN took that leap as your number 2 guy. But JSN at the beginning of the year definitely wasn't your number 2 guy. He was so hard to figure out how to get him involved in the offense. So that stat, especially that he didn't get anything like that in the first half of the season, was a little surprising. And that to me is showing a little bit of age and showing a little bit of decline. But his contract is not showing it. And like Jackson, I remember talking to Jackson, he brought up the point that not many teams have what you might call 3
No.
kind of elite receivers. If Tyler's still in that category, it's tough to really build that offense around it, because it's so hard. Like, because I got to get everybody involved. Opposed to just having that compliment. And I find that when you look at it, if you had a DK and JSN, and then just a third guy, you brought up Bobo, for example, or you sign a guy, a speedster, so who cares? That third guy is your third guy. You can figure out how to use him. And just like if you had a Ben Johnson, I'm sure you could figure out, I got this kid, Bobo, that I can utilize the hell out of his strengths and work him in the system, and he's not making any money.
Well, exactly. So just here's your numbers. Tyler caught 79 passes last year for 894. He had 5 touchdowns. Only 16 wideouts hit all 3 of those marks in the NFL, but heading into his age, 32, Lockett is set to have the 8th highest cap hit among receivers. Not worth it. I love Tyler. I think there needs to be a conversation of, hey, Tyler, this isn't going to work at the cap money value that we're potentially going to give you. Because if you do trade him or cut him, you have a dead money cap of the other half of that sum is 19 is what he's going to cost you to. So do you have it where, hey, Kate, you're going to come back, we're going to kick this down the can, you're going to restructure again, and when you're going to retire after next year, or hey, Tyler, you might want to retire, or we're going to have to release you or trade you. And I don't think Tyler wants to leave the Seattle area. He's got his realty business there. His wife, I'm pretty sure, is from here now. Like, I'm pretty sure he's one of those guys that's going to stay around Seattle. That's where he's going to want to be. So that's kind of my view on Tyler. I just don't see that he's back on his current deal. There's no way.
No.
The other one, so here's the one that we've all had a gripe with, a lot of us Seahawk guys out here in the podcast world. Will Dissly. 28 next year, 1 year left on his deal. Cap hit 10 million. If you
Wow.
cut him or release him, doesn't matter when, you get 7 million of that back. So
Yeah.
you're
Okay. So
only eating,
that's a given.
that's a done. Like, there's no way. He's
Yeah.
not a tight end one. He's barely a tight end two. Like, I'd move on from him.
Yeah.
Brian Monet, 29, so he's already almost 30.
Hurt all year.
He's due basically six. If you cut him, you get it all back. You don't lose
Right.
any of it.
Okay. So he's gone.
Yeah. So this is where some of Seattle's money's invested. You've got Draymond Jones, 18.2 million. Next year, Jaron Reed, 5.9 million. And then they drafted Cameron Young last year. So he's the guy. So it just makes sense for Seattle to move on from Monet. But here's your other unrestricted free agents. So you got Bobby Wagner,
Right.
34 years old. You got Jordan Brooks, 27, Devin Bush, 26. That's all three of your linebackers right there, all restricted free agents or unrestricted free agents, I should say. Noah Fant, Colby Parkinson, Phil Haynes, Damian Lewis, Jake Curhan, Jason Peters, Evan Brown, Leonard Williams, Mario Edwards, Artie Burns, RJ Dallas. Out of that list, I'm bringing back probably Colby Parkinson because I can get him cheap. Maybe Evan Brown because he can play both guard spots in a pinch. I'm definitely bringing back Leonard Williams. Um, and maybe Artie Burns because he actually did play pretty well in the nickel there and as a depth corner. Um, I don't see Wagner being back. I don't know how you bring Brooks back because Brooks has proven when he's not playing with another elite linebacker or smart linebacker, he struggles. Look at what happened with Cody Barton. Like he was nowhere near as effective. So unless you're going to sign somebody, I just say move on and draft some guys, like bring in some guys that way. You got restricted free agents or Daryl Taylor, John Radigan, Mike Jack. I'd maybe bring Mike Jack back. Taylor, not a chance. I don't see the
No.
value in it. And just so all of our fans know, these are your draft picks going into the draft this year. You got pick 16 in the first round, no picks in the second round. Zero. That is Leonard Williams. If we keep him, will be our second round pick. The third round, you got pick number 78. So that's about mid to down, mid-ish. Then you got third round pick number 81, which is the one we got in that trade. Then we got a fourth round, fifth round, sixth round, seventh round. So basically, Seattle's sitting there with 7 picks this year, which we all know John doesn't usually like going into a draft with less than 10.
Yep.
So I see the potential that Seattle will possibly move back out of 16, get some more picks. And, if you talk to a lot of guys, I know this as well. The NFL's grading system for our, listeners out there,
Mm-hmm.
basically the top 12
Yep.
players in a draft are really the only first round grades.
Yeah.
After that, the next 40 picks are all graded the same.
Yep.
So it's not that big of a deal. Like when people used to give, Seattle crap, why did you take this guy here? You reached for him, and then you find out that John Schneider got a call from a GM saying, "Hey, I was about to take him to pick after you." Like
Right.
it's basically kind of throwing mud at a wall and hoping something sticks after that top 12 picks are gone. Because none of those guys after that, like, are gonna pan out and be studs. Like, look at the Eagles this year. They had Jalen Carter, who was a top pick. Then they picked, I believe his name was Nolan Smith, the other
Nolan
DN or
Smith.
whatever from Georgia. You didn't hear much about that guy this year, did you?
No.
And that's the fact of the matter. So
I think you're right. I think John trades. I mean, I'm leaning towards him trading 16. And just because if he had some more capital, if he had 10 picks, maybe not. But like you said, I mean, you got to absolutely fall in love with some dude at 16. I mean, really. So shop it around, accumulate picks, and really try to come in with 10 picks. Or, at the end of the day, you've picked 10 dudes. That's how I look at it. But yeah, man, that's gonna be interesting. But I think you're spot on with a lot of those cuts and but like I said, maybe John pulls a couple of wild cards, and that you just didn't see coming and does something crazy, like because he's on his own now. There is no Pete and John show, right? But yeah, man. Yo, moving on, man. You wanted to touch on let's move on from this and touch on our kind of final topic tonight.
So our final topic tonight for everybody is Senior Bowl. So I know a lot of people out there don't really pay attention to Senior Bowl. Myself, I watch Senior Bowl. I dive into it just like Rob Staten does.
Yeah.
Um, it's a pretty big deal if you want to kind of have an idea of where the Seahawks are looking, what they're going to draft. They changed the rules this year. Juniors are allowed in the Senior Bowl. Used to only be senior players, so fourth year guys. But if you're looking at quarterbacks, everybody that's out there and hoping Seattle drafts someone outside of the top three, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Joe Milton, Spencer Rattler. They're all guys that are going to be playing in this game. It's on NFL Network throughout the week. They post, and they show the drills and all that kind of stuff. And then the game, I believe, is on Saturday. Jim Nagy, who runs the Senior Bowl, used to be a scout for the Seahawks during the heyday of Pete Carroll. So he's usually someone, if you ever see a podcast out there with Jim Nagy on it, listen to it. He's really insightful on what the Seahawks like to do. And John Schneider puts a lot of value in the Senior Bowl. Like that's
Right.
why he's now out traveling because he is going to be at the Senior Bowl this coming weekend. So I would definitely tune into that. I've kind of started to build my quarterback index, my running back index for some of our pods coming up. But yeah, if people really want to dial in and start paying attention to what Seattle could do and some of the interesting guys, Rob's mentioned guys like Michael Penix, Spencer Rattler, Peyton Hillis, the linebacker, he's going to be at the Senior Bowl. So it's a good idea just to see how these guys handle the NFL kind of lifestyle because they're put through it for a week. They get asked a bunch of questions. They have to learn NFL offenses, terminology, all that kind of stuff. So it's a good idea just to kind of tune in and see, you might ID some guys, you can always throw them in our comment section and I can give you a rundown of them on one of our pods. So, yeah, no, it's going to be good. It's something that's definitely something for our fans to take a look at.
Yeah, guys. Hey, definitely go ahead. Go check that out. Yeah, man. Good stuff. We got some couple of good pods coming up as well with some guests, guys. Also, come check us out on a pod this Thursday. It's gonna be live with it's called Seahawks Talk with Joe Stevens at 7 p.m. this Thursday. So that's gonna be over on his channel, and that's a live stream. So we're just gonna be breaking it down, and who knows, by that time we could be breaking down the new head coach and some other guys that maybe add it to the staff. So, and before we get out of here too, guys, make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're liking what you hear, and all the other good stuff. Hit the like button and the notification button, and we're also on all wherever you get your audio too for your podcast. So yeah, man. All right, let's wrap it up tonight, and we'll check you guys out on the next one here.
See you guys.
Go
Go
Hawks.
Hawks.